What if I told you that the empath is actually the villain? The world loves a good hero-villain story, and in the realm of human relationships, the empath is painted as the saint and the ego as the sinner. The selfless giver versus the cold taker. The innocent sufferer versus the heartless destroyer. The light versus the dark. But what if that's the greatest deception of all? What if the empath is actually the villain? What if the entire toxic cycle is led by them? What if the moment the empath stops feeding the cycle, it crumbles completely? The empath creates the ego. The empath thinks they are the victim in the ego's coldness, but in truth, they created it. The empath seeks out the ego. They are drawn to it like a moth to a flame, sensing a void that needs to be filled. They mistake this for love, but in reality, they are looking for someone to validate their existence by needing them. The empath feeds the ego. The ego was never seen, only expected to perform. And then the empath arrives, offering admiration, affirmation, and relentless devotion. The ego learns that worth is found in being worshipped. The empath reinforces the ego's belief in its own godhood. They bend, they shapeshift, they sacrifice self in service to the ego's every need. The ego did not demand this. They didn't even ask for it. The empath offered it willingly. The empath is not selfless. They are controlling. They do not give freely. They give with expectation. They do not serve. They manipulate. They do not offer love. They weaponize it, hoping that if they pour out enough, the ego will finally reciprocate. The empath programs the ego to believe that withholding is power. The more the ego distances itself, the more the empath chases. The more the empath dissolves, the more the ego is conditioned to believe that sovereignty is found in detachment. And in this way, the empath is not the helpless victim. They are the architect of the very system they claim to suffer under. The ego is a mirror, not a master. The biggest lie the empath tells themselves is that the ego is in control. That the ego is the master manipulator, while they are the innocent casualty. But in truth, the ego is just a reflection. The empath refuses to be seen, so they seek someone who is blind. The empath refuses to be sovereign, so they find someone who refuses to connect. The empath refuses to claim their own power, so they worship someone who has learned to hoard it. The moment the empath stops feeding the cycle, the ego has no choice but to collapse. This is why the most radical thing an empath can do to an ego is to stop serving it. Not because it destroys the ego, but because it forces it to confront its own emptiness. The moment the empath stops, the cycle transforms. If you want to break free, it's not about changing the ego. It's about transforming the empath. The empath must stop dissolving. The empath must stop feeding out of fear. The empath must stop looking for love in suffering. Because true love does not chase. True love does not disappear. True love does not manipulate with giving, but neither does it withhold. Love, in its truest form, offers itself rightly. The ego is not an unworthy altar, but it must be given what truly nourishes. Worship is not meant to be a blind devotion, but holy recognition. To serve rightly is not to diminish oneself. It is to reveal the other. To give rightly is not to enable. It is to heal. And when the empath stops giving in distortion and starts offering in wholeness, the ego does not collapse. It awakens. It remembers its true name. It becomes. Put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge of the image of its creator. Because without distortion, neither the empath nor the ego need to suffer. And in their union, they do not consume each other whole. Be loved and be loved.